All right, so this is a bit of a dry run for one small part of a workshop I'm doing for StarEAST and Romainia Testing. So let's talk about components, because in a WebDriver test, it is important to understand the different components that you're working with and how they fit together. And some people are very particular about the language they use, specifically when speaking about the difference between drivers, frameworks, and libraries. So let's run through some practical example of this. So we've got a browser. That's the whole part that we are working through UI testing. WebDriver, its only job is to talk to manipulate, to drive the browser. Now, WebDriver is made up a number of different pieces and parts. There are what are called the bindings, which are the language-specific, platform-specific pieces. And you can see the list of different language platforms there, .NET, Python, I think there's even Perl libraries. Now, there are support classes which are built by the WebDriver team. And that gives you support for things like WebDriver wait, expected conditions. These are support libraries that are in addition to the bindings. And the support libraries, the support classes, are in the same language. So you have the .NET bindings, you have support classes for .NET. You have Python bindings, you have support classes for Python. So they're matching pieces there. So WebDriver also, in many cases, depending on the specific browser, uses a proxy to communicate back and forth to the browser. And that proxy is a little executable that runs on the machine or in the Docker container or wherever that browser is running. And it provides communication to the browser back and forth. So commands to the browser go through the proxy, get routed to the browser. Responses back from the browser come back through the proxy and back to the WebDriver. Okay, so we got that going back and forth. But here's the thing about WebDriver. All it knows is how to talk to either the browser or the browser through the proxy. WebDriver actually doesn't know how to run itself. It doesn't know anything about how to actually run tests. So it doesn't know anything about asserts, that sort of thing. So to run your WebDriver code, you need to have some type of a test framework. And by this, I'm meaning something like RSpec if you're on Ruby, JUnit for Java, NUnit for .NET, any test framework for that particular language binding of WebDriver. In the test framework, then you write tests, which in turn invoke WebDriver commands to talk to the proxy, to talk to the browser, get information back and forth, to do things like asserts and other stuff. So during the actual workshop, I will be showing examples of the code at this point, but this is just kind of a little dry run here. All right, so those test frameworks are very computer statement specific. And many teams, many organizations want to go a bit further to use something like Gherkin or a more natural language. So in that case, then, you need to build in a language framework. And that, again, is something like Cucumber, which lets you use Gherkin, Robot. There are a number of other things. And this gets you to the point where then, instead of using a very granular test language like JUnit or NUnit, you're now using things like given I am logged on as an administrator, when I go to the control panel and I create a new user, then the new user should show in the user list. And that's what the language framework does. Then the next thing is you'll be using some tool to run all of these tests generally. Each of these language frameworks, each of the test frameworks come with their own specific runner. But in most cases, all of this gets built into some type of delivery pipeline run via, say, Visual Studio Team System, TFS, Jenkins, things like that. So we start off with the driver, WebDriver itself, the proxy in the browser. Then we use a test framework, which you wrap your WebDriver code in, and that lets you actually build tests with checks and asserts lets you do reporting, and you may or may not use something like Cucumber or another language framework. And then all of that is often, in many cases, executed by some type of a tool such as Jenkins, TFS, etc., etc. So hopefully this was clear. Looking forward to some feedback.